For years, short-term rentals have been painted as the villain of the hotel industry. Airbnb shows up, steals demand, and upends the market. Or so the story goes. But nearly 2 decades in, and hotels are still standing. The truth is that the relationship between hotels and short-term rentals is actually a lot more nuanced and a lot more interesting. We here at Lighthouse just put out a new blog that's super interesting. I'll put the link in the comments so you can read it, but if you've only got 3 minutes, I'm going to give you all of the key takeaways. So let's get into it. The first key takeaway of the blog explains how short-term rentals are actually a very opportunistic threat. If you take a look at their supply trends over the course of a year, it's very, very different than hotels. In the blog, I'll show you some famous spring break markets here in the US to really illustrate exactly what this looks like. And the findings are very interesting. So the key takeaway is that short-term rentals are somewhat dangerous, but only during very specific windows. If you know when supply is spiking in your market, then you'll know when you're most exposed. The second key takeaway from this blog is a really fascinating one that we actually discovered here at Lighthouse. We put out a white paper a few years ago that discovered short-term rentals tend to book earlier than hotels. Often desirable short-term rentals in a given market will raise rate and sell rooms first, which can then be a leading indicator for hotels. Instead of reacting late, hoteliers can watch short-term rentals to see the future of their demand before it hits their own books, which can help you with your pricing and forecasting. Our third key takeaway from this blog is all about legislation. So unlike hotels, short-term rentals are a lot more sensitive to changes in legislation. A single policy change can really clobber supply, for example, in Istanbul, where listings dropped almost 40% after some new licensing rules. But there's some nuance here. Some regulations can remove those casual mom and pop owners, and that just leaves behind these really large, sophisticated, multi-property short-term rental owners. So the big takeaway here from the blog is that when you're looking at short-term rentals in your market, it's not just how much supply there is, but also who owns that supply. Our next big takeaway from the blog is that not all short-term rentals are trying to compete with your hotel. So if you've got a city center hotel that allows one-night stays, that is what we here at Lighthouse call a hotel-like short-term rental. And that's a real competitor. By contrast, a huge mountain lodge with 5-night minimum and a fishing pond, they're going for a totally different guest. In these markets that have a really high share of hotel-like short-term rentals, they face a much higher threat level. Whereas markets without a lot of hotel-like short-term rental supply have far less overlap than a lot of hoteliers may assume. In the final section of the blog, we talk about how if you're in one of these mature markets that have been dealing with short-term rentals for a long time, one way that you can win is just by being different. Winning the battle doesn't really have much to do with copying what your short-term rental competitors are doing. It's more so about leaning into those things that make your hotel different from the short-term rentals. Things that hotels offer like consistency, more transparency with their pricing, 24-hour staff. And then there's also a very good chance that you as a hotel have some amenities that a short-term rental just really cannot recreate. So let's put it all together. Short-term rentals aren't necessarily an existential threat, but they are a signal, and it really depends on your specific market as to what the threat level is. So if you want the full data behind all of these insights, be sure to dive into the blog. It might just change how you look at short-term rentals.